heart problems, and immune-related dysfunction. All right, get ready for a dose of practical advice that will leave you inspired to take better care of yourself right now. Dr. David Jockers is about to show you how to avoid skin issues, heart problems, and immune-related dysfunction by avoiding the greatest threats to liver health. Did you know that thyroid health is directly linked to liver function? Dr. Jockers gives great details about this and what to do about cold hands and feet, hormonal issues, plus much more. You'll also learn quite a bit about the importance of bile flow for a healthy liver, which foods to eat to enhance bile flow, and many powerful liver cleansing strategies that you can start today without much expense or effort. Enjoy the presentation with Dr. David Jockers. David, sometimes I just can't help saying it this time. I feel like I'm having like this party with all the people I know for a long time. It's great to have you a part of this event. I appreciate you coming from Atlanta. What are you up to?
Well, it's an honor and privilege to be here. And so I was just telling you, my family, we just moved into a new home. So we're loving that. And, I'm just really passionate about creating content. I'm a functional medicine practitioner, and so we just try to create the world's best health content, and really excited about that, and just teaching people how to live, how to eat, how to set up a good morning routine, and strategies to help them improve their health.
Yeah, people got to know something about you. You don't really do this as much as you're in practice. You see people every day as part of your work, right?
Well, I'm part-time practice, so I see people once a week, 1 day a week. I work in my practice, and then the other days, my team and I were creating content, working on content, whether it's videos, articles, things like that. I found that, working one-on-one with people, there's great intimacy there, and I do love that. To me, it's a ministry, but the ability to reach hundreds of thousands of people. My website will get over 1 million unique visitors every single month, so it's just amazing to be able to reach that many people.
Yeah, my wife said the same thing to me. It was a long time ago when I was seeing people one-on-one and coaching them and all of that. It's like so much better to be able to do something like this and reach so many people at one time instead of one-on-one.
Yes, absolutely. Right. And in this video series, I think it's going to impact so many people.
Yeah, it's important. So let's jump into it. Talk about why the liver is such an important organ. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. The liver is one of our major filtering organs, right? So basically, when we have different toxins that are coming in or toxins produced from within our body. So we have exogenous toxins, which are toxins that are coming from outside, like think about pollution or like if we smoked, chemicals that might be in our food or our water. Those are exogenous chemicals. And they're going to cause havoc. They're going to wreak havoc in the body if they're not neutralized. And so the liver will help neutralize it. Now, we also have endogenous toxins, which are going to be toxins formed within the body. And this is going to be things like bacterial metabolites. For example, a lot of bacteria will, as they die off, they produce something called lipopolysaccharides, LPS, which is a very strong toxin, right? So the body is hardwired to try to prevent against systemic infections. So it has this major inflammatory response whenever LPS rises in the bloodstream. So the liver helps to deactivate the LPS and helps basically make it less inflammatory for the body and put it in a form where we can excrete it. So this is really important. So the liver is our major filtering organ. It takes chemicals and puts them in a form where we can then neutralize them and then get them out of the body through our breathing, through our urination, defecation, through our feces, and then also through sweat.
When I'm listening to you talk about how important the liver is, not too many people, I would imagine, go to your office or talk to you every day about something being wrong with their liver, right? It's like it gets no respect.
That's very true. And I would say every single chronic disease that I've seen that's out there, there's liver issues that need to be addressed, okay? But yeah, you're right. Very few people are coming in saying, hey, my liver is my main problem here. And that's because the symptoms can be so vague, right? When somebody has a liver issue, right? But the liver, I mean, again, very important to thyroid hormone conversion. Okay, so a lot of thyroid issues are really related to liver issues. We know, I just want to take some time on all the functions of the liver. We think about it just as the filtering organ, but it's very, very important for all different proteins like albumin, for example, in the blood, which helps to bind to different things, help bring, certain electrolytes to cells. So important for that. So important for good thyroid activity at the cell. Like when our thyroid produces mostly inactive thyroid hormone. So the thyroid's producing a hormone, T4, thyroxine, but most of that's inactive. It has to be activated into our active T3. 60% of that activation is going to be coming from the liver. So if our liver is struggling, we're not going to get good activation. And oftentimes I'll see people will have thyroid issues. Their hair will be falling out. They have dry skin. They can't lose weight. They're constipated. And it's actually a backed up liver that we've got to address the liver issues, which is oftentimes one of the main factors for them to get well. So that's a huge thing. Blood sugar stability. Okay, so if you're going, for example, you're trying to go a longer period of time without meals and you get very lightheaded, dizzy, oftentimes it has to do with the liver, and the liver's not able to, because the liver has this stored sugar and it's not able to release it effectively to keep your blood sugar stable. So that can oftentimes be an issue. So, I mean, there's so many different symptoms. We could talk more about symptoms too of liver problems. But I mean, we gotta produce bile, for example, to digest our fats. And bile is so important for moving toxins out of the body. And if we're not able to do that, we can oftentimes end up with pale colored stools, for example, or chronic itchiness, right? So a lot of times people are like, yeah, I'm always itchy. I've got these rashes, things like that. And it's because their bile is not being produced well or not being released well, which is a very important function of the liver. And so they'll end up with different toxins that will back up, and a condition called pruritus, where they've got this chronic itchiness that takes place. So, I mean, I can go on and on. The liver is just so important for just about everything in the body. So really critical.
I'm so glad you just said all of that, because that's exactly why I created this docu class. Why am I just talking about the liver? Like it's just an organ and, like you say, a filtering organ. But it's so connected to all these health problems, like you're saying, that people are experiencing all the time. And they're not being told at the doctor's office, hey, why don't we try to make your liver healthy? And we already get it. The people watching us, they know. Can't really ask most conventionally trained doctors about this because they don't know how to help somebody to have their liver healthier. And they're not even thinking that way anyway. So it's like a pointless conversation to even try and have with most conventionally trained doctors. Let's talk about how the liver starts to get polluted, gets more toxic. How does this all develop,
Yeah, so going back to those exogenous and endogenous toxins, so with the liver, we've got three major phases to help eliminate those toxins. So obviously, if we're taking in a lot of toxins, that's going to be a huge factor. So if we are living in an inner city, for example, where there's higher levels of pollution, then we're going to be taking in obviously more toxins. Also, if we're in an environment, for example, if there's mold in our home, or if it's like an old home, maybe there's lead paint, things like that, where we're being exposed to stuff that's just really problematic, different chemicals in our home. That's why I'm a big fan of air filtration. I know you are as well. Because again, if we're breathing in toxins, which is one way that most people understand how we get toxicity to begin with, and that's just gonna overload our body. And then beyond that, if we've got issues with our gut microbiome, where we've got a whole bunch of an overgrowth of parasites, candida yeast, or bacteria, and oftentimes all three of them, we're going to be producing a lot of endogenous toxins. We can also have other toxins like, amalgam fillings in our mouth, for example. So things that may have been put into our body, different surgeries. We might have titanium plates. We might have, different, all kinds of things that may be just slowly releasing toxins on a consistent basis within us. So these are all forms. And so the body, the way our liver responds to it, is we have phase 1 liver detoxification. Phase 1 is led by cytochrome P50, right? And so that is a very, very important enzyme that helps to basically get started with the detoxification process. Take this toxin that's in the system and start moving it in a way to where we can eliminate it. The problem with that phase is that it produces a lot of free radicals, a lot of oxidative stress, almost like rusting, right? So there's a level of just all these potentially hazard chemicals. Again, another endogenous form of toxicity produced within the body. So it needs to shunt right into phase 2. And with phase 2, that is very important. We've got a whole bunch of different pathways there. We've got sulfation, which depends on sulfur. We've got acetylation, which depends on acetyl-CoA. Okay, we've got glycination, which depends on glycine, or glucuronidation, I should say, which depends on glycine. We've got methylation, and we also have glutathione based detoxification. And so all these things depend on key nutrients that we have to have in our diet and our lifestyle. And oftentimes people are lacking in those things. And so we see with a lot of people, they may have fast phase 1, but slow phase 2. And they can actually create more problems, like multiple chemical sensitivities oftentimes, these kind of conditions where people are reacting to perfumes and they go into, not that I recommend this, but Bed Bath & Beyond, right? And they're smelling all the different aromas and they feel terrible afterwards. And oftentimes it's fast phase 1, slow phase 2 detoxification. Phase 2 is more demanding on the body.
A lot of people don't recognize even, it's so great what you're saying,
Yeah.
Dr. Jockers, about recognizing that you don't feel well because this is all could be happening in the liver, right?
Yes.
Smelling gasoline, all of these things, not really being conscious day to day and eating the most nutritious foods. So now you're nutrient low, plus another biggie that you mentioned about mercury-based silver fillings.
Yes.
I mean, that millions and millions of people have that pouring into their body. Conventional dentistry is telling you this. They're not even leaching out mercury, though.
Yeah.
That's why it's very confusing for people to even understand this. Talk about uninformed consent. They don't even know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, oral health, I know you're an expert in this area, but chronic infections in our mouth are also a big deal, right? Whether it's root canals or cavitations, we can oftentimes have those infections, and the whole time those infections are there, they are slowly dripping these endotoxins in the body, overwhelming the liver. So when the liver is responding and there's just too much toxicity going on, it's like a conveyor belt. It gets overloaded and things start to spill out. So oftentimes we'll speed up that phase 1 level, right? So we'll get this faster phase 1, but phase 2 is more demanding on the body. We need more nutrients. And so I see a lot of people where they got fast phase 1, slow phase 2 detoxification, and that can be a major issue here.
And then you've got the whole conventional food industry saying, so a little bit of chemicals we use here and there and everywhere. And so it's no wonder that people are suffering so much. I mean, to the tune of what I've been saying in this event so much, over 100 million people, most of them walking around having no idea their liver is being compromised more and more over the years. And the food that they're eating is so polluted as well. So here it is, you're talking about getting enough nutrients on board so the liver can function well. They're not getting that. And on top of that, they're being exposed to so many toxins from the air, the water they're drinking, and the food. It's just, it's no win situation unless people start really taking more seriously what their environment is like and what they're doing.
For sure. I mean, really at the root of chronic disease is too much toxicity and deficiency. It's toxicity and deficiency where we have too much of what we don't need, like chemicals that are in our environment, in our foods. So all these chemicals that our body's got to eliminate, and then a deficiency in key things that we do need. And we may have a diet that provides enough nutrients, but because we're taking in so much toxins, it's depleting those things. Like you look at something like magnesium, most of society is magnesium deficient, and magnesium is critical for phase 1, phase 2, and what we call phase 3 liver detoxification, where we move toxins through the bowels. And so we're eliminating those things. So basically, when we are taking in a lot of toxins, then we're going to just roll right through magnesium. We're going to end up with magnesium deficiency, which is a big cause of a lot of different health issues, headaches, trouble sleeping, HPA axis dysfunction or adrenal fatigue. Oftentimes at the underlying root, there's magnesium issues going on there. Constipation can be a factor there. So we're going to just deplete these nutrients, these key nutrients that we need when we're taking in all these different toxins.
So to make this really clear for people who are listening to you right now, wherever somebody is at, you mentioned so many things just now in a few minutes, so I think it's important that we focus in on what it looks like if your liver is failing in one way or another. You mentioned headaches, hormonal issues, so that's connected to the way we feel as well, emotional problems, having that erratic behavior, the stuff that people know doesn't feel right, chronic fatigue, trouble in their thinking process and ability to concentrate, all of these things, would you say it's fair to say that there's got to be some sort of liver problem if people are suffering in these ways? And forget about, I didn't even mention heart disease, cancer concerns, autoimmune disorders, all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Liver has to be addressed. It has to be looked at in detail. And a part of every single health plan should include daily detoxification or daily cleansing strategies. And many of them are very simple things that we can be doing.
We're going to get into it in a little bit, but why don't we first talk about labs? I think it's very clear at this point that if you're suffering with some sort of health problem, it's a good idea to take better care of your liver. We get it. But what about labs, which I know for some people is probably more valuable than others? Others may not, I don't care, I'm just going to start taking care of my liver. But for others, having the labs and being able to see those markers and seeing how they change over time, it's good feedback. So what do you say to people?
Absolutely. Just getting some basic standard labs. These aren't even necessarily specialized laboratories, although you could do that. Go to your doctor, get a complete blood count and liver enzymes can reveal a lot. So first thing we got to look at is liver enzymes. So you have four main ones, AST, ALT. You also have GGT, and you have alkaline phosphatase. And so normally, these enzymes are very critical with the liver detoxification process and all the different functions of the liver. So normally those ranges in a functional medicine model, not a disease model, okay? So when you look at the lab ranges, it'll be flagged as high if you are basically above a certain standard deviation. And those labs are, honestly, I don't necessarily follow that. I mean, if you are flagged high, you have a very serious issue, okay? But the reality is they're coming up with those levels based on testing a whole bunch of different people that go to labs. And typically people that go to labs have chronic disease. And so I look at a much tighter range. In functional medicine, we look at a much tighter range. And ideally, we want those liver enzymes to be above 10. Okay, when they're below 10, it can often indicate, AST and ALT, let's start with that, and GGT. They should be above 10 and below ideally 25, okay? And so in that range, 10 to 25 is typically a sign of pretty good liver function, okay? Or at least one measurement of decent liver function.
But I would imagine, if you don't mind me interrupting, that a lot of people, 75, 100, 200, 300, their levels could be like that. And let me just ask you what your opinion is. Do you think, conventionally speaking, maybe even doctors won't even be alarmed if people have numbers quite a bit higher than they should, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, they're always going to be looking at what's going on. Now, if it gets very high, they're thinking hepatitis, some sort of major infection in the liver. Really anything above 40 there is going to be possible, fatty liver type issues, things like that. But in that 10 to 25 range, so I'll see a lot of times people will be in the early 30s. They'll be 28, 30, 31, and really we want it in that 10 to 20 range. That's kind of the ideal for optimal liver function there. So when it's above that, we know that there's inflammation or some sort of activity going on in the liver that's not good. So we want to look at that. And then with the alkaline phosphatase, the ideal range there is 66 to 90. Now in the medical labs, their range is much higher. It's going to be between 44 and 110. So above 110 is going to indicate possibly some sort of pathology that may be taking place or disease process. Unless it's a child and they have bone growth, because alkaline phosphatase is important for that. Below that, and we're thinking zinc deficiency. And so I see a lot of times people will have alkaline phosphatase levels, 48, 49, 50. And that's oftentimes an indication of zinc and sometimes vitamin C deficiencies need to be addressed. Zinc is another really critical mineral, the very, very important for all the different processes with the liver. And a lot of people are deficient in zinc. It's another very common deficiency. Zinc, magnesium, B vitamins. We just go right through these. Vitamin C, we go right through these. The more stress our body is under, the more we're going to deplete these. And that could be mental, emotional stress. That could be physical stress, like car accidents, things like that. Obviously put a tremendous stress on the body, trauma. And then chemical stressors, like we're talking about, these kind of slow stealth stressors that we don't necessarily notice right away. We can go out and breathe in bad air. We don't always notice it right away, but when we're doing that on a continual basis, it just slows the whole system down, overwhelms our body. We deplete a lot of these key nutrients and we start to have problems. And so we can start to see a lot of these things on the liver enzymes. And so I think those are very critical to be looking at. If the liver enzymes are too low, oftentimes like the AST, ALT, GGT, oftentimes B6 deficiencies. We see that. B6 is a very, very critical nutrient that really helps the liver to function the way it's supposed to. So a good functional medicine practitioner can look at those tests. And, I just gave you the ranges. So you can kind of look at those tests and start to see if you've got issues. Now, your tests could be normal, right? And they could be optimal in that range. That doesn't necessarily mean you don't have a liver issue. So that's the other thing, right? A good history and understanding your symptoms and your possible exposures. You may have normal labs, okay, even in a functional medicine model, and still not feel good. So, so we've got to address that too.
That's a really important point that I'm so glad you mentioned at the end. So a couple things. If you go to a conventionally trained doctor, probably not a good idea to expect any of this to happen. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And even if they do see something high, they're not going to really understand what the root cause of it is. So if they see things that are causing hepatitis, if it's acute hepatitis, the medical system may have some good answers, right, to help you in the acute situation. However, very rarely is that the case. And most of the people that are listening to this will never experience that in their life, right? However, they will experience issues with a sluggish liver, possibly fatty liver, and the medical solutions are just not gonna get to the root cause and address it.
But also that second part I wanted to bring up to you is that people could still have liver problems even in the functional medicine realm if their labs are okay. You're saying they could still have liver problems? What makes you say that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at the labs, that's always important. We always want to look at that, but we got to treat the whole the whole individual, not just the labs, right? So that's always the idea. It's a holistic model. It's if you come into me, you're telling me the symptoms you're experiencing, you're telling me what your history looks like, your oral health history, your trauma history, your stress levels, your exposure to different things. I've got to understand that, take that into account. That honestly should be about 2/3 of my decision-making process when it comes to understanding the best route, the best health plan for you. The other third would be the labs. What does the labs indicate? So if everything's pointing to an overload of toxicity, but the labs look normal, well, I don't want to wait for the labs to get bad, in a sense. I want to address these types of issues. And again, sometimes, especially when we already have the disease process going on, we might do things that may be a little bit more invasive or a little more expensive. As opposed to that, on the precautionary side or the preventative side, we could do things that are less costly, less invasive, right? Like increasing our hydration levels, maybe drinking water with lemon in it, maybe doing a little intermittent fasting, changing our environment a little bit, getting outside more. So these are things that we could be doing that are non-invasive, that are strategies that every one of us can be doing to help improve our liver function. So we're going to look at the labs, we're going to look at, the history of the individual and start to create a plan from there.
And speaking like a young man like you are, raising a family, I'm sure you got a very important message is what I'm getting from you. Those people out there who may have normal labs, but they are a little concerned about their health, or their future health, I should say. And what you're really saying is make these moves now, because just because you're okay now, 15, 20 years from now, if you're not really thinking about what you're eating and drinking, and you are taking in those toxins, and you feel perfectly fine now in your 30s or your 40s, in your 50s and 60s, eventually this kind of bioaccumulates, it builds up in your body, and that's when you really pay the price, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the first step every single person that's listening to this should do is start to make changes in the things they can control, right? That they can easily control. Sometimes it's hard to control things like a root canal or a silver filling. It can be inexpensive to go through a process to help remove those things. But you can control what you put in your mouth, right? And that's why in the natural health world, we put so much emphasis on the food we eat because it's something we control every single day. So getting rid of conventionally raised animal products, that's a huge bioaccumulation factor. So when these animals are eating genetically modified grains that are loaded with pesticides and herbicides and oftentimes mold toxins, they're getting sick. And then because they're sick, or in order to prevent sickness in the animals, they're injecting them with antibiotics or putting antibiotics in their feed. Antibiotics are one of the main things that damages our liver, all different types of pharmaceuticals, right? Growth hormones that oftentimes they'll put in these animal products. So got to get rid of the conventionally raised animal products. That's huge. Try to get filtered water, not tap water that's loaded with chlorine and fluoride and all these types of toxins. So getting some good water. Trying to move towards a more of an organic diet. So you may not be able to do it with everything depending on where you're at. But typically the advice I'll give is when we look at a fruit or vegetable produce, if you're gonna eat the outer layer, you think about like berries, for example, or cucumber, cucumber you could scrape it off, but like celery, something along those lines. If you're eating the outer layer of it, you ideally should try to do your best to find organic. For some reason you can't, at least soak it in water and a little bit of vinegar, like a little apple cider vinegar in there. Soak it for 10 minutes or so. Try to just eliminate as many of the chemicals that could possibly be on there, and that will help. If you're not eating the outer layer, for example, like an avocado, not as important. Okay, you're gonna peel off that outer layer. There's gonna be less chemicals on that food, so that's key. So eating more fruits and vegetables, getting a lot of, particularly trying to get organic or at least cleaned off produce. I'm a fan of removing grains. A lot of times grains can be, full of different mycotoxins, right? And you've got things like gluten that a lot of people have sensitivities to, right? And they can elevate your blood sugar and cause problems there. And then changing over your meat products. So, and of course, getting rid of processed foods, sugars, things like that. It's very, very important.
So I say it as like maybe for the beginners out there, but you know what? Even for people who feel like they know what's going on with food, why don't we just nail down right now, David, what are the worst foods for the liver?
Absolutely. Well, first one I would say is processed foods. Okay, so if something has been overly processed, has a lot of refined grains, refined oils in it, got to get rid of that. Those things are loaded with chemicals that are going to overload our livers. So we got to get rid of that. And they're also very deficient in nutrients. They don't have real live bioavailable nutrients. You may look at something and says, that's processed, like a cereal box or something like that. And it says, 25% of your vitamin A. But the reality is, if it's made up of sugar, grains, if it's got all these different types of things in the beginning of it, those things don't naturally have vitamin A. So it's all synthetic that's added back and your body just eliminates that. So you got to get rid of the processed foods. We need to get rid of conventionally raised animal products. So again, when animals are raised well, they can be healthy, like grass-fed, pasture-raised, organic. But when they are raised on conventional grains and loaded with hormones, antibiotics, this is very, very toxic stuff, and they bioaccumulate them, right? And so it literally takes 5 pounds of chemically sprayed grain to produce 1 pound of beef. So it's all bioaccumulated in there. So we're consuming that. It's gonna be really problematic. Refined vegetable oils. So corn oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, things like that. I mean, corn oil, if you were to eat some corn, it would literally take you 1,000 bushels of corn to produce 1 ounce of corn oil. Yet, you can never do that. Paul Bunyan couldn't eat 1,000 bushels, right? Yet in our society, you can easily do that by getting a salad dressing or a condiment, mayonnaise, things like that. Oftentimes they have corn oil or soybean oil. And these things are genetically modified. And that's how they're, basically able to get them so cheap because our government pays for that, unfortunately. And they're loaded with chemicals, and they're very high in damaged fats, and particularly omega-6 fatty acids, which can cause what we call an omega-6 to omega-3 imbalance. So omega-3 fatty acids help balance the omega-6 fats. We need both of them to help create kind of an anti-inflammatory environment, to help our cells respond to hormones and different messages in the body. However, when we consume a lot of these refined vegetable oils, we end up with omega-6 dominance. And also when we can consume conventional meat products, these are really high in omega-6, very low in omega-3, which creates more inflammation throughout our body. And again, these oils also are loaded with chemicals and toxins. So we've got to make sure we're avoiding those. So those are really the biggest ones, right? We definitely need to make sure we're avoiding all those. I mean, you can get, today's day and age, it's much easier because if you like ice cream, you can find coconut milk ice cream out there that doesn't have all the different chemicals and toxins in it. If you like cookies, you can find healthier forms of cookies, right? And you can make them. There's a lot of recipes out there where you can make them with real ingredients. So we just got to get off the processed foods, the conventional animal products, and the refined oils and start to move to a natural, more healthier, more organic-based diet.
A couple things I want to take on, David, right away. Conventionally speaking, when you're walking through the aisles of the supermarkets in the middle, everything you just described seems to be littered with this. So it's so simple. As you were talking, I'm just thinking about all the people out there who are shopping that way and buying that kind of food. The cookies, the crackers, the pretzels, the chips, the cereals, even the processed, the peanut butters, the jellies, all these different things. You have to look at everything in those aisles sitting on shelves. The oils that you mentioned, the sugars in there, are they even real sugars? Are they modified, genetically manipulated? I say that instead of genetically modified, but genetically manipulated food, it's not even really food. So conventionally speaking, watch out if most of your money is being spent on those foods. But I'd also like you to address, give me a little comment or two about even in the organic world, going to the health food store and looking for all these quote unquote organic cookies and crackers and everything, where here it is, you were talking about oils alone. And if people are suffering with health issues and they're saying, I'm eating organic food, everything, I don't get it. Why is the food something that could possibly be hurting me? It's these foods that are really so processed still, even though they're organic, no?
I mean, you definitely need to try to make your better choices, right? And so sometimes for some people, making a replacement choice, if they don't want instead of the Oreos, they go with the organic Oreos, can be a good step in the right direction, right? But certainly if you're dealing with chronic disease, don't expect that to be your solution right there. You definitely need to be a little bit more sensitive to the foods that you're eating. And you got to look out for things that are, for example, high in fructose. I didn't mention that before, but high fructose corn syrup is a big issue. And in the natural world, a lot of things are sweetened with things like agave, right? And agave, even though it's, a more natural form, very high in fructose. And fructose can overwhelm the liver. So we've got to make sure we're avoiding that as much as possible. And try to, your idea should be, if something is, on the outer, if you can find it in the produce section, right? Obviously, it's going to tend to be a lot healthier for your body, right? Or if it's, a organic, pasture-raised, wild-caught type of animal, think about what our ancestors had access to. So, 500 years ago, whatever it was, there was no processed food. And so our ancestors were eating foods that they could either, pick, grow themselves or hunt. And so that was what they did. And these were more natural foods. Another thing that we need to address too is water. So if we are drinking typical tap water or even a lot of bottled water, because your typical bottle, the plastic bottles are leaching out phthalates and one in particular called BPA, but there's many different chemicals that are in plastics. If they're leaching those things out into the water and we're drinking that on a regular basis, we are again overwhelming our liver. So I'm a huge fan of getting a good water filtration system at your home. These days, it's not that expensive. You can get, a portable. When I was a college student in $100,000+ of debt, I got a portable reverse osmosis system for $250 or something like that, $200. Put it in my, under my sink, and I had access to clean water. Put a little bit of salt in that afterwards. There's the Big Berkey, which is another brand that's good that you can get, that you can travel with. So a lot of different options when it comes to getting good tap water. A great investment to be doing is changing your food, getting good high quality filtered water. So important for helping the liver to just reduce the amount of toxins coming in from the outside And then also on top of that, helping improve all the different pathways in the liver and our body's ability to get these toxins out.
Yeah, everywhere you hear conventionally inflammation is the problem. They're never, of course, saying inflammation of the liver, but everything you're talking about is living a more anti inflammatory lifestyle. And these things are going to really help.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, just so important to be able to do it. And you got to really prioritize it. And so it needs to be, at the top of your list of things that you're doing on a regular basis, changing your water, changing your food. Okay. And again, it's as simple as trying to shop more towards the perimeter of the store. Typically going to have less of the processed foods. There's also many recipes too. If there's things that you enjoy, for example, ice cream, you can easily make a coconut milk based ice cream. Coconut's a great food. You can use natural sweeteners like stevia, for example, that don't elevate your blood sugar. And it can be very, very simple and easy with a blender to make recipes like this. So it really just takes a little bit of effort on your part to change, to have that desire to change your diet and your lifestyle, to go out, find good recipes, good resources, and start to find, most people are only eating half a dozen to, 6 to 12 different meals a week, right? And if you can find 6 to 12 good recipes that you thoroughly enjoy, that's really all you need. And you can make these lifestyle changes.
That's an interesting point. Somebody out there, again, I'm not making fun, but I'm just thinking what you just said at the end. I have so much variety. I have pasta, I have bread, I have cookies, crackers. If they're eating that kind of food, you're eating flour all the time. It's
Yes.
like one thing. You also mentioned about plastic getting into the water, the plastic bottles. It was interesting. Of all the years that I've been in this industry, to hear it put to me so simply that the reason why the plastic's getting into the water, this toxin with so many people drinking bottled water, is because most of the conventionally built water bottles, the Poland Springs, all the brands out there that people are used to, they're making the plastic bottles and then throwing the water in right away. So they're not letting the bottles outgas at all. Most people don't even hear that information. Let's go into some of the best foods and herbs, though, for the liver. Let's talk
Yeah,
about that.
yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about foods and herbs for the liver, you got to be thinking number one, vegetables, right? In particular, your dark green leafies can be very, very helpful. Your cruciferous vegetables, for example, they're very high in sulfur compounds as well as indoles, right, which are really key for phase one, phase two liver detoxification. So broccoli, cauliflower, um, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. These things are really, really good for liver function. On top of that, lemons and limes. I'm a huge fan of lemons and limes. Very rich in vitamin C, very rich in bioflavonoids, very rich in different electrolytes that are needed for good liver function. So, and they're very low in sugar. So anything that's going to really elevate our blood sugar, and for some people, they can eat a whole lot of fruit and not get a big rise in blood sugar. Other people are going to be very insulin resistant, and even a little bit of sugar can really cause problems in their body, even if it's a healthier sugar form. Lemons and limes have virtually no sugar in them, yet you get all these powerful phytonutrients as well as vitamin C that's so important for good liver function. And so those are great. Sprouts are another hidden gem. So you can get things like broccoli sprouts, which are extremely rich in different compounds like indole 3 carbinol, which is very important for detoxifying things like BPA and different xenoestrogens that we're taking in from our environment, oftentimes cosmetics and things like that we're putting in on our face. So getting broccoli sprouts in on a regular basis, fermented vegetables. So if you were to do something like a pickle or sauerkraut or kimchi, these things are very, very rich in a whole bunch of different compounds that are more bioavailable because the bacteria has fermented and broken down the vegetables, and they release things like, for example, fermented cabbage has something called vitamin U, which is really helpful for liver detoxification. So real powerful there. Yeah, you were going to say something?
The things you just mentioned about the sprouts and the kimchi or the sauerkrauts and all that, another great reason to go to farmers markets, right? Because
Yes.
conventionally speaking, you go to the stores, you try to buy these things, they're okay, right? Even if you get a higher quality brand. But it can be really special if you go to a farmer's market, you find someone who's making it really fresh for you the right way. When you taste those foods, you will get turned on to eating these
Yeah,
things.
yeah, absolutely. You want to get the best quality. That's what you always should be thinking. When it comes to food choices, you want to be thinking, I want the maximal amount of nutrients, minimal amount of toxins. So going to farmers markets, looking for organic products, always a really, really good idea. So some other things that are really good for liver health, garlic and onions typically can be very, very good for most people because they're very rich in sulfur compounds. So those can be very, very powerful. You could even do things like, for example, organ meats, right? Like eating a grass-fed liver, for example, from a cow or a chicken. So a lot of people think, I've gotten this question a lot of times. People are like, well, how could a liver be healthy if that's where we store our toxins? But the thing is, we don't actually store toxins in our liver. Liver does not store toxins. Liver helps neutralize and helps our body put toxins in a form where we can eliminate toxins. So it's a toxin neutralizer. Now, if we have fatty liver, we store toxins in our fat. That would be an issue there. Okay, so that's why you never want to get a grain-fed beef liver, but instead grass-fed organic liver. It's got all the powerful nutrients, coenzyme Q10, mitochondria that are in there, DNA, RNA, all these powerful nutrients that can help the body. You can even do it with supplements, right? Or you could take like a grass-fed organ complex or something along those lines that can really, really help. So we need amino acids, right? So a lot of times, going on like a very low protein diet can help with liver detoxification, but not long term. So we want to do that oftentimes short term when we go on like a cleanse. But then beyond that, we want to be taking in good quality amino acids, and we want to be able to digest them effectively. And I see that being an issue. For example, a lot of times when people don't respond well to eating good quality meat, it's because they're not producing enough stomach acid, right? And oftentimes they have gut dysbiosis type of issues where the gut microbiome is imbalanced. We need to start to address that, and that can be really important. Now, as far as herbs that are key for the liver, okay, I always say bitter is good for your liver. Okay, so that's a great thing to remember. It's just the more bitter the herb, the more it's going to help stimulate all the different processes of the liver, as well as all your digestive juices, your ability to produce stomach acid, bile, and pancreatic enzymes. And so things like ginger, for example, ginger, extremely bitter herb, amazing for the liver function, amazing for digestive juice function. Oregano, basil, thyme, parsley, milk thistle. These things are so good for helping improve liver function. So we want to be consuming those on a regular basis. And this is something that is just not addressed enough in our society. We focus a lot on more so the macronutrients, how much protein is in this, how much fat, how much carbohydrates, less focus on polyphenols, less focus on powerful phytonutrients that we want to get in our system. So I'm a huge fan of putting herbs. We want to put herbs pretty much on everything. Okay, and so if you're eating a meal, you should have some level of herbs in there. I always tell people when you're building your meals, think about your healthy fats, avocados, for example, loaded with nutrients. Okay, a lot of powerful nutrients in avocados that are critical for liver detoxification. Olives, olive oil. Okay, even butter from grass-fed cows can be very healthy for liver function because there's a lot of good fat-soluble nutrients like vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K2 that are in there. So get healthy fats. You want to be thinking antioxidants. How can I get more vegetables, more lemons and limes? You can squeeze those over different things. For example, apple cider vinegar, another great thing because it's tart and bitter, helps stimulate all our digestive juices, helps cleanse out the bile ducts, right, to move bile out, which is key for phase 3 liver detoxification and removing toxins through the gut, right, through our stool. So that's really, really powerful there. And things like parsley, for example, just really, really easy to implement. Cilantro, really easy to implement. So you should always have, in a sense, like some hors d'oeuvres or some herbs that you're sprinkling over your food. Okay. And the idea is, hey, you want to eat something like 70% of your meal, 70, 80% should be vegetables and phytonutrients. And then you surround that with good, healthy proteins, right? Grass-fed, organic animal products, if you want to choose animal products, healthy fats, making sure you're getting a lot of your calories. The actual calories, when you eat parsley, you're really not getting calories, okay? You're getting phytonutrients. Calories, you want to get a lot of those from healthy fats, avocados, olives. They're very calorie dense, and they're very easy on the body, right? Easy on the system. So that's very important as well. Now, if you're somebody that has maybe possibly dealt with issues with your gallbladder, perhaps you've had gallstones or you have symptoms of issues with your gallbladder, and those symptoms might be that your stools are pale, for example. They don't have the normal brown color. It's a sign we're not getting enough of the bilirubin and the bile breakdown basically into the stool. So that's very important. You may have chronic itchiness. You may have constipation. You may have abdominal pain, right? Things like that. These could all indicate issues with gallbladder function, particularly your stools that float, right? You might see a pale stool that floats and it might be greasy. Okay, that's a sign that you're not breaking down fat very effectively. Okay, abdominal pain is a big issue. You may have pain underneath your right shoulder blade. That's a warning sign of issues going on with your gallbladder and possibly liver there, because the liver creates the bile. The gallbladder is where you store bile and use it when you have a higher fat meal. Okay, so you need that storage, because the reason why our bodies have this is because our ancestors did more feast and famine. They weren't grazing all day long. They would eat very large meals, right? And oftentimes, go a day or multiple days without food. So when they did eat, they ate a lot of food and they needed extra bile. They couldn't just have kind of the slow production that the liver makes. And so they would secrete that when they would eat that large meal. So if we're not getting that, we may have, again, these stools that float, may have a lot of these symptoms of low bile or poor gallbladder function. And so, if that's the case, doing a lot of these sorts of herbs can be very important because they help improve bile flow. And on top of that, what I've found is that clinically, people that do have issues with bile flow oftentimes don't respond well to pork. Okay, even if it's grass-fed pork, they want to take that out. In general, I'm not a fan of consuming pork because pig products tend to bioaccumulate toxins, whereas cows have multiple stomachs and a better overall detoxification system. So when the cows are eating good food, they have less toxins in their meat, more nutrients, whereas pigs, more like humans, they have one stomach. They tend to bioaccumulate more toxins. So in general, I don't recommend eating pork, even if it's grass-fed. And that can be a problem for people with gallbladder issues. Also, onions, believe it or not. Even though onions are a great food, one of my favorite vegetables, I love sauteed onions. So I'll saute them in like grass-fed butter or coconut oil or something like that. For people with gallbladder issues, oftentimes they don't respond well to onions, so they need to address that. Nightshade vegetables, things like tomatoes, potatoes, particularly white potatoes. Sweet potatoes typically they respond well to, but tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, bell peppers. I love bell peppers, rich in nutrients, but oftentimes people that have gallbladder issues or bile issues don't respond well to them, so they need to address that. Eggs, especially from pasture-raised chickens, can be really healthy, okay? And they're very rich in sulfur, fat-soluble nutrients. But people that have gallbladder issues and bile flow issues oftentimes respond very poorly to eggs. So if you're somebody that you eat eggs, you just don't feel good. You feel nauseous. Maybe you get more constipated. Maybe you get more itchy, and you have skin reactions, rashes, things like that. Could be an issue with your gallbladder and your bile flow. Okay, so eliminating those types of foods. And the other one would be nuts. A lot of times they struggle with nuts, these individuals. So going on a form of an elimination diet, taking these things out and consuming more of the foods that we talked about, drinking lemon water on a daily basis. Okay, you just take a lemon, one lemon a day or one lime. You can change up if you want. Very similar micronutrient breakdown for a lemon and a lime. And you should say, okay, I'm going to go through a whole lemon every single day. I might squeeze some on my food. I might squeeze it on my salad as part of my salad dressing. I might squeeze it on my meat, okay, which actually the lemon, or you could use like apple cider vinegar, will help pre-metabolize the meat, which makes it easier on your digestive system. So you might squeeze it on there, but you could squeeze it in your water. So you should be going through a lemon or a lime every single day. So when you go to the store, buy a lemon for every single person in your family, and your goal is, hey, I'm gonna get as much juice out of this lemon each day, right? Or lime, or whatever you want to do as far as that goes. And that can be a really, really powerful way of improving your bile flow, improving your liver function. Go get some herbs. So one week you might choose parsley. Get a bunch of parsley, and you're gonna say, okay, I'm gonna have a little bit of this parsley every single day with most of my meals, or at least one meal a day. And I'm gonna go through this bunch of parsley this week. Or you might say, okay, I'm gonna go through 2 stalks of celery. Okay, I'm gonna go through the celery. Parsley is gonna be more dense than celery, and nutrients are good for the liver, so you might want to double up the amount of celery, 2 stalks. Parsley, go with 1 stalk. Um, Whether if it's dandelion, for example. So instead of parsley this week, you might go with dandelion. Or you could double up and go with both of them. Dandelion is another very bitter herb, okay, that you can be putting on your food. Cilantro might be another one. So every single week, if you want variety, get one of those things and figure out ways to put that into your salads, into, different meat dishes, whatever it is, and you're going to get a lot of those beneficial compounds.
David, you just motivated me so much. The next time people's birthdays or anniversaries are coming up, I'm going to be getting a bag of lemons, I think, for my daughter. I hope she's not watching because give it away for a birthday gift. I'm going to have greens for people, all kinds of things. I mean, this is the gift of health, what you were just talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty simple to do. I mean, it just takes again intentionality. So if you go in it with the right mindset, because these are foods that most people never use, or if they have parsley, it's occasionally when they eat out at a fancy restaurant and it's like this little hors d'oeuvre, right? They're not really consuming it on a daily basis. And that's what you want to do is you want to consume these things, be a herb, enthusiast. And so you're thinking, and it's fun, especially with kids or with your spouse. You could be thinking, okay, what herb are we going to do this week? And you just think about it. I mean, you can implement these things in almost any recipe and they taste great. You could take it a little bit before a meal if you want to, or like, for example, if you go and you get sushi, they typically give you like the pickled ginger, okay? Which oftentimes is loaded with sugar if you go to like a sushi restaurant. However, traditionally, pickled ginger is a great way to clean your palate. It's fermented ginger. I mean, so ginger is so powerful with compounds that reduce inflammation in your body, reduce pain levels, and also help stimulate all the phases of liver detoxification. Also really good for producing enough digestive juices, stomach acid, things like that. So it's fantastic to eat a little bit of that before your meal and then a little bit after your meal, okay? So you can stimulate the digestive juices and then at the back end, so you can clean your palate and really get a good flow of bile, okay? To help metabolize everything as it moves into your small intestine.
And you really made it very clear about how important it is to have clean fats as well. For someone that has liver issues, sometimes just go out to get bacon or hamburgers or whatever, somewhere where they're not conscious of what's going on with the food quality, it might be really low. Make sure that you have a really good quality fats. It actually seems counterintuitive, but it's actually helpful for those people in their liver, right?
Healthy fats are so critical. Okay, that you've got to make that change. So you get rid of again the refined vegetable oils. You change out your animal products. Okay, that's so important. You're looking for grass-fed, organic, pasture-raised. Okay, again, if we're looking at animal products, if you want to know the most nutrient-dense animal product you can consume, it's going to be basically a wild-caught salmon, something like that swims upstream. I mean, think about salmon, for example. Salmon is swimming upstream against the current in cold water. So just the ability to adapt to cold water gives it a survival advantage, and it's got powerful nutrients, mitochondria, tons of mitochondria that help produce energy within our cells. Salmon is so rich in mitochondria, okay? And they're able to literally jump 20 feet in the air while swimming upstream. You think about the incredible strength. So in salmon, you've got things like astaxanthin. So getting some good wild-caught salmon in your diet, if you're consuming animal products, amazing strategy. Grass-fed beef, okay? Believe it or not, grass-fed beef, very rich in a lot of powerful nutrients, carnitine, carnosine, fat-soluble nutrients, particularly when you go with the organ meats. But the muscle meat can be healthy as well. You can also get things like collagen. You can get collagen proteins. Our ancestors, they would eat animals from head to tail. And so what they would do there is they would eat a lot of tendons and a lot of ligaments and joints. And those collagenous proteins have really, really powerful compounds that are very good for our joints, for our skin, for our hair. Today's society, we only eat muscle meats. It's like we only want the tenderloin or whatever it is. And we're actually missing very powerful nutrients. Okay, and it's the same thing with chicken. I always tell people the healthiest part of a chicken wing is actually the joint capsule. Like if you only eat the meat around it, you're really only getting protein, maybe a little bit of selenium and a zinc, a couple of nutrients, but you're not getting the powerful amino acid complex that helps balance the sulfur compounds that you might be getting from the muscle meat, okay? And so you definitely want to make sure you're getting some good collagen-based protein or doing broth, for example, like bone broth or something along those lines, good organic quality, been tested ideally.